everyone, welcome to our morning edition of Arirang News. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour. Vietnam's top leader is in Seoul for a summit with President Lee Jae-myung today, making him the first foreign leader to make a state visit to Korea since Lee took office in early June. This is the first time in more than a decade that a Vietnamese political leader is visiting Korea. The commander of U.S. Forces Korea says capabilities matter rather than numbers, stressing the need for changes to American troops stationed in Korea, potentially signaling a downsizing of forces ahead of the summit between leaders of South Korea and the United States. North Korea has denounced a large-scale joint military exercise between Seoul and Washington. But at the same time, the North was also seen taking down propaganda loudspeakers near the border, following similar moves by Seoul in a bid to ease tensions. President Lee Jae-myung is hosting Vietnam's political leader To Lam at his office in Seoul. Their talks will include cooperation on trade, investment, and science technology, including nuclear energy and high-speed rail, to bolster the two countries' comprehensive strategic partnership. Later in the day, Lam is set to meet with heads of major South Korean businesses, including SK Group. It's the first trip by a general secretary of Vietnam's Communist Party to Korea in 11 years. Lam is also the first foreign leader to be hosted by the new South Korean president. So as we just heard, the General Secretary of Vietnam's Communist Party, the country's most powerful official, is in Seoul for a 4-day trip as South Korea looks to strengthen ties with the fourth largest economy in Southeast Asia. For more on the significance of this visit, we're joined by Cho Won-duk, Assistant Professor at the Department of Indo-Pacific Studies at Korea National Diplomatic Academy. Professor Cho, thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me. Yeah.
So this is the first state visit by a Vietnamese leader to South Korea in more than a decade. What might be discussed at the summit?
As you know, from what we know, I think the agenda will be broad, covering political, economic, technology, and future-oriented cooperations. I think first of all, there will be a reaffirmation of the comprehensive strategic partnership between the two countries, which is at the highest level of bilateral ties, upgraded in 2020, and a commitment to make this partnership more future-oriented and mutually beneficial. In addition, I think that, as you know, we are convening APEC this year. At the same time, Vietnam is expected to hold it in 2027. I think the two leaders might discuss on cooperating issues regarding APEC and the shared importance of multilateral cooperations. And also, as you mentioned, that the talks will be centered on trade and investment. And President Lee has already told Vietnam's state news agency that both countries share the goal of reaching $150 billion in bilateral trade by 2030, which is a major jump from the $86.7 billion recorded last year. I think the infrastructure cooperation will be a key highlight in this summit, I think. Discussions are expected on Korean participation in Vietnam's national projects, such as nuclear power development, high-speed rail networks, and smart city constructions. These are the areas where South Korea has both technological expertise and commercial interest, and where Vietnam sees opportunities to accelerate its national vision of becoming an upper middle income countries by 2030 and a high income countries by 2045. And also I think the two leaders may discuss on science, technology, human capital development cooperations. I think this is also be on the list. And finally, the people-to-people exchanges between two countries will not be overlooked. President Lee has emphasized the depth of existing ties For example, there are around 100,000 Korean Vietnamese multicultural families, and referring to the countries as in-laws in a friendly way. And he has highlighted the role of the Vietnamese workers in Korea as a reliable civilian diplomats and signaled his intention to improve incentives, working conditions, and support for multicultural household.
I see, and Lam is the first foreign leader to make a state visit to South Korea since President Lee Jae-myung took office in early June. Could you tell us more about the significance of this visit?
Yes, the fact that President Lee chose to host the General Secretary To Lam as his very first state guest is not a coincidence. In diplomatic protocol, the identity of the first state visitor under a new administration sends a deliberate signal about a country's foreign policy priorities. And so here, the message is clear. Vietnam is not only South Korea's top partner in ASEAN, but also a pivotal player in Seoul's broader regional strategy. As you mentioned, the visit comes 11 years after last time a Vietnamese Communist Party chief visited South Korea before, and the timing reflects both sides' interest in deepening a comprehensive strategic partnerships. So by making this first high-level foreign engagement of his term, Mr. Lee in signaling that Southeast Asia and Vietnam in particular will be central to his diplomatic agenda.
I see, and there are major other diplomatic events coming up this month. And of course, eyes are now on President Lee's summit with U.S. President Donald Trump, which could take place on the 25th of this month. And Lee said he'll focus on pragmatic diplomacy. Will we be able to see that approach in action?
Yes, we will see that approach in action in the summit between President Lee and President Donald Trump. I think that this summit is going to be an early and very visible test of President Lee's pragmatic diplomacy. It will be his first face-to-face meeting with President Trump since taking office in June. And I think that the agenda is both politically sensitive and economically significant. First of all, on the side of economic side, the two leaders will likely follow up on last month's trade and tariffs negotiations, which resulted in Korea agreeing to major U.S. investment and energy purchase commitments in exchange for reducing proposed tariff hikes. Now the focus will be on resolving the details, investment structures, non-tariff issues, and market access, where both sides still need to specify. On the other side, in the security side, Washington is pushing what is called alliance modernization, which could mean a larger South Korean defense spending and a broader role of U.S. forces Korea in the Indo-Pacific, which is highly related to the issue of U.S. Strategic flexibility. So President Trump has a record of pressing allies for steep increases in cost sharing, figures much higher than Korea's current contribution. I think Seoul's strategy will be to offer increases in overall defense spending while keeping those demands within political manageable limits.
Right, I guess we'll have to keep a close eye on the summit. All right, Professor Cho, thank you so much for your insight today. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
The South Korean Defense Press Corps recently had a chance to visit the United States military base Camp Humphreys in Pyeongtaek. There, the USFK commander gave his views on key issues, including alliance modernization. Our defense correspondent Kim Bo-kyung was there.
Capabilities over size. That is what General Xavier Brunson, the commander of the United States Forces Korea, emphasized when asked to define alliance modernization. This follows concerns in Seoul over a possible reduction of U.S. troops on the Korean peninsula for strategic flexibility. The general did not directly mention any troop reduction, but he did highlight the need for Seoul to acknowledge strategic flexibility as well, citing the example of Patriot batteries that have been temporarily moved to the Middle East, but that are expected to return with upgrades.
And whenever things of strategic flexibility happen, I think that the onus is on this command, read me, to ensure that our allies understand what I'm doing. But there's nothing that says that we can't move to where we need to be in support of my own nation and our own objectives.
The general underlined that the ROK-U.S. alliance is not just dealing with North Korea, which he called the closest alligator to the boat, but also with Russia and China, which both have strong links with Pyongyang.
What's being asked of Korea is to be stronger against DPRK, that we might have the flexibility as we modernize our alliance so that we could go do other things.
Against such a backdrop, the issue of transferring wartime operational control, the OPCON transfer, was brought up as well. General Brunson said rushing things would hurt readiness and that conditions need to be bilaterally agreed upon.
Now, if we choose to take shortcuts, that could endanger the readiness of the force here on the peninsula. So I think that our approach has to be one that is, again, bilaterally managed, bilaterally considered, and bilaterally assessed in order to get to that point.
The allies are slated to go ahead with the annual Ulchi Freedom Shield starting next week. Some outdoor exercises have been adjusted, but the general says he is comfortable with the decision and asks the allies will still exercise fully. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, North Korea has denounced the upcoming joint military drills between Seoul and Washington, vowing to take what it calls self-defense measures. The warning comes amid recent signs of easing tensions, including both Seoul and Pyongyang taking down propaganda loudspeakers along the border. Our Moon Ji-young reports.
North Korea's defense chief has denounced a planned large-scale joint military exercise between South Korea and the U.S. According to the North state-run Korean Central News Agency on Monday, Defense Minister No Kang-chol warned that Pyongyang would exercise its self-defense right against any provocation. He delivered the warning a week before Seoul and Washington are set to commence their annual summertime Ulchi Freedom Shield exercise scheduled from August 18th to 28th. Defense Minister No asserted that the joint exercise, conducted under a simulated nuclear war scenario, constitutes a direct military provocation against the North, significantly amplifies the unpredictability of the armistice on the Korean peninsula, and cements regional destabilization. This follows the announcement by South Korea and the U.S. on Thursday that they would conduct their regular combined Ulchi Freedom Shield exercise for the defense of the Korean peninsula in contingencies. The allies also stated that around 20 of the more than 40 field training exercises planned during this period would be postponed to September. However, North Korea did not mention the postponement of some exercises. North Korea's stern warning comes despite recent signs of potential de-escalation from the reclusive state. Last Saturday, Pyongyang began dismantling some loudspeakers installed along its border, which were previously used for noise campaigns against South Korea. South Korea's Joint Chief of Staff confirmed that North Korean military activities to remove loudspeakers were detected in parts of the frontline area as of Saturday morning. The military indicated that further verification is required to determine if this removal will extend to all border areas. This move by the North comes after the South completed removing its border loudspeakers last Tuesday, aimed at reducing inter-Korean tensions. Moon Ji-young, Arirang News.
On the local front, the first high-level consultation between government officials and the ruling party took place since the Democratic Party elected a new leader. Key topics included follow-up measures for the trade deal between South Korea and the United States. Our political correspondent Shin Ha-young reports.
South Korea's government and ruling party agreed to provide support to industries and businesses expected to be most affected by the new U.S. tariffs. This comes after the two sides on Sunday reviewed follow-up measures to the recent trade agreement between South Korea and the United States. During the meeting, Democratic Party leader Chung Cheong-le said the party and government will evaluate the impact of the recent trade deal on the economy and industries and devise response measures.
We will work to ensure the outcome of the trade talks directly benefits the national interest and quickly introduce the necessary bills and policies in the National Assembly to carry out follow-up measures without delay.
The two sides agreed to deliberate on the Lee Jae-myung administration's recent proposal to tighten capital gains tax rules by lowering the threshold for major shareholders, a move that sparked strong backlash from retail investors. Currently, only those holding 5 billion won, roughly $3.6 million or more, in a single listed stock are taxed. Under the new plan, that threshold would be reduced to 1 billion won, or just under $720,000.
We closely consulted and decided to deliberate on the issue while monitoring developments.
Sunday's meeting was the first high-level consultation between government officials and the ruling party since four-term lawmaker Chung was elected party leader. Prime Minister Kim Min-seok congratulated him on his election and emphasized that the party, government, and presidential office need to work as one. 신하영, Arirang News.
Washington says it's working to set up a meeting between leaders of the U.S., Russia, and Ukraine. While Kyiv has not yet commented on the matter, European allies say any peace talks with Moscow must include Ukraine. Our Lee Seung-jae has more.
U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance said Sunday that Washington is working to arrange talks between Russian President Vladimir Putin and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy.
That to change. We're at a point now where we're now trying to figure out, frankly, scheduling and things like that around when these three leaders could sit down and discuss an end to this conflict. Now,
Speaking to Fox News, Vance also noted that a meeting between the leaders of Russia and Ukraine would be more productive after Putin first sits down with U.S. President Donald Trump. The U.S. Vice President added that the Trump administration hopes to secure a negotiated settlement to the war in Ukraine, though he warned that both sides will probably be unhappy with the outcome.
We're going to try to find some negotiated settlement that the Ukrainians and the Russians can live with, where they can live in relative peace, where the killing stops. It's not going to make anybody super happy,
Meanwhile, according to a senior U.S. official and 3 people briefed on internal discussions, the White House is considering inviting Zelenskyy to Alaska, where Trump is scheduled to meet Putin next week. However, the sources said no visit has been finalized and it remains unclear whether Zelenskyy will attend. When asked about the formal invitation, the senior official said that Trump remains open to a trilateral summit, but added that the White House is focusing on planning the bilateral summit requested by Putin. While Kyiv has yet to comment on the matter, European allies of Ukraine have reiterated that any peace talks with Russia must include Ukraine. In a joint statement on Saturday, the leaders of the UK, France, Italy, Germany, Poland, Finland, and the European Commission underscored that position ahead of Friday's Trump-Putin meeting in Alaska. The European leaders also expressed their support for Trump's efforts to end the war in Ukraine, but stressed that only an approach that combines diplomacy, support to Ukraine, and pressure on the Russian Federation to end their illegal war can succeed. Zelenskyy has previously said any agreements reached without Kyiv's involvement would amount to dead decisions. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said Monday that the goal of expanding military operations in the Gaza Strip is not to prolong the war but to end it. Speaking to the press, the Israeli leader stressed that Israel has no choice but to defeat Hamas and complete the mission, adding that Israel's goal is not to occupy Gaza but to liberate it. He noted that he ordered the military to accelerate the timetable for seizing Gaza from Hamas control, citing his determination to end the war swiftly. Netanyahu reiterated 5 principles outlined during a security cabinet meeting last week, where he called for the disarmament of Hamas, the return of all hostages, the demilitarization of Gaza, Israeli security control over the territory, and the establishment of an alternative civilian government not linked to Hamas or the Palestinian Authority.
Good morning, I'm Choi Ji-hee, and this is The World Now. Beginning in the United States, President Donald Trump has announced sweeping measures to clean up Washington, D.C. He has ordered the immediate removal of homeless people from the city and pledged to crack down on violent crime. Trump said on Truth Social on Saturday that homeless individuals will be moved out immediately to facilities far from the Capitol. Trump also said he would unveil on Monday his initiative to address the city's violent crime. The president threatened to take federal control of Washington, D.C. on August 5th, saying that crime in Washington, D.C. is totally out of control. The city's mayor, Muriel Bowser, responded on Sunday that Trump's move is legally questionable and noted that violent crime in the city is down 26% this year, with overall crime down 7%, and that 2024 had the lowest violent crime rate in 3 decades. The mayor said what the city needs instead are more federal prosecutors, judges, and funding for repairs to parks and buildings. The leaders of Australia and New Zealand agreed to strengthen military cooperation in the face of heightened regional tensions, including a Chinese live-fire naval drill earlier this year. New Zealand Prime Minister Christopher Luxon and Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese met on Saturday in New Zealand, where they highlighted the need for improved interoperability between their armed forces. Luxon called Australia New Zealand's only ally and called for a unified ANZAC force, referring to the Australian-New Zealand Army Corps operating across the region. Albanese reaffirmed their shared commitment to regional stability. The summit comes after Chinese naval vessels conducted a live-fire exercise in the Tasman Sea in February without prior notification, an action that disrupted commercial flights and prompted Canberra and Wellington to seek deeper defense alignment. 4 crew members of NASA's Crew 10 mission have safely returned to Earth after a 5-month stay aboard the International Space Station. The SpaceX Crew Dragon Endurance capsule splashed down in the Pacific Ocean off the coast of Southern California on Saturday at 11:33 a.m. The returning astronauts include NASA's Anne McClain and Nicole Ayers, Japan's Takuya Onishi, and Russia's Kirill Peskov. Their mission involved conducting over 200 scientific experiments, performing spacewalks, and maintaining the station during their 146 days aboard. In Bosnia and Herzegovina, the 10th International Waterfall Jumping Competition took place in Jace on Saturday. The contest drew 16 divers from across the globe to leap from the 20-meter-high Pliva waterfall into the deep pool below in a unique traditional event. Competitors executed the lasta, or swallow-style jumps, diving styles in which the arms extend outward and the diver enters the water head first. The competition, supported by local and federal authorities and held annually, continues to grow as a tourism highlight.
We have a lot of rain in the forecast for this week. Through tomorrow, the south coast could see up 200 millimeters of downpours. Meanwhile, the rest of southern provinces and Jeju Island might get up to 80 millimeters. Now, the south coast in particular should brace for heavy downpours of around 30 millimeters per hour from this afternoon into the night. Please stay safe and take precautions. Meanwhile, for parts of Gyeonggi-do and Gangwon-do provinces, So passing showers will bring 5 to 40 millimeters of rainfall along with thunderstorms in the afternoon. Rain and cloudy skies will bring down the highs to 31 degrees Celsius here in Seoul, Daegu at just 29 degrees. Now, heat wave advisory only remains in place for Jeju for now with an expected high of 30 degrees Celsius. But a heat advisory could get reissued in parts of West with higher daytime highs expected in the capital areas tomorrow. But again, this week we'll be seeing a lot of rain, so please keep an umbrella handy.
That's all we have for this morning. Arirang News will be back at 5 p.m. Korea time. Thanks for watching.